Hey, welcome to this video tutorial. This one I am going through the A-level paper 3, Crime and Deviance with Theory and Methods from summer 2017. And as you can see, I am going to give you a little bit of a brief overview of the whole paper. It's quite a big paper, so any questions that you want in a little bit more detail, just please make sure that you comment and I will try and have a little bit of a look at those as I have some model answers as well, so I would love to share them with you. Okay, so as you can see in front of you, you have got the overview of the paper. Just make sure that when you get there that you're filling in your candidate number and your details. And this is really similar to paper 1 in the fact that you answer your the questions on the paper itself. Bit different from paper 2, which is your topics, because you have to choose 2 topics out of a range of quite a few from section A and section B. You get an additional answer paper. This one, you do it straight onto the paper. Okay. So just a couple of instructions. Make sure that you're using black ink. Make sure you fill in all the details. Make sure that you answer the questions in the space provided. Any additional paper used, make sure that you number it really carefully. Do all your rough work. One thing that I will say as an examiner, and this has come from one of the chief examiners, is that especially when we get to the longer exam questions, the 10 marker, the 30 markers and the 20 markers, please make sure that you are planning your answers, and you can do them in your booklet. That is totally fine, and anything that you don't manage to put into your answers, if it's on your plan, the examiner should be looking at that as well and can credit it for AL1 marks. The maximum mark for this paper is like the other two. You get 80 marks available. And your bigger essay questions should be answered in continuous prose, showing good written communication, good English, good organisation and the specialist vocabulary. That just means that you're chucking as much keywords, key concepts of sociological background as much as you can. Okay, so let's have a little bit of a look at the first question. Dead similar to paper 1. It's asking you to outline 2 things. So some of the trigger words or some of the hooks in the question that you've got to look for was 2 reasons, ethnic differences and conviction rates. Okay, so for this question, really popular. The majority of students did pretty well on this question. It was well answered. Popular reasons seem to be racism within the police, things like that, or material deprivation was another popular one. And just make sure that you're being very specific to which ethnic group that you're talking about. So, for example, African Caribbean backgrounds, and then suggest that they tend to appear on crime statistics even more because they are stops and search more or something like that. You're looking for 2 reasons. Making sure that you're applying to each hook in the question, just to make sure that you're getting the full marks available. Okay, second one, outline 3 functions that crime and deviance may perform. Again, another question that was really easily answered by the majority of students. The most popular answers for this one was boundary maintenance, adaptation and change, and safety valve. They were the popular ones, but they could give Marxist functions. They appeared as well on this marks. And the key concepts or the key hooks that you're looking for in the question here is your function. So make sure you identify the function and suggest an example of maybe a crime or deviant act, and just making sure that you're explaining it well, just to be awarded that full 2nd mark available. Okay. So those 2 short questions, the 4 and the 6 mark, roughly about 15 minutes being spent on them, but I would recommend that you probably answer those a lot quicker than that, and that'll just save you a little bit of time for later on when you are answering the longer questions. So moving on quickly to question number 3. Now question number 3 is a 10 marker, and what is really noticeable in these 10 markers is that they want you to show application, and that's what they're focusing on here. Okay, so this question, they give you an item and you have got to select the hooks from the item, that's here, and then make sure that you are applying them to the hooks in the question as well. So 2 ways in which a deviant subculture may respond to the difficulties of achieving the mainstream goals. And the popular hooks that were in this question were the young people may underachieve at school, and that allowed you to attach someone like Cohen about not being able to achieve the mainstream goals. So the boys in his case turned to non-utilitarian crime, things like joyriding and things like that, to gain status in an alternative way. Similarly, the second hook, which was quite popular, was the deprived and unstable neighbourhoods, which led students to write about Cloward and Olin, and a lot of them outlined retreatist, criminal and conflict subcultures as well. Just to mention on this one, a lot of students misapplied Merton. Merton in this case, even though it does read like it is talking about Merton with the American Dream, Merton was an individual response, so it was only really credited if they successfully talked about subcultural responses. Okay. And there was a bit of confusion between the utilitarian and non-utilitarian, but what you're looking for there in this answer is your two selections from the item, apply different examples of two different studies, and make sure that you are analysing it. 10-mark question, you should be spending about 15 minutes on this answer in order to get the marks available. Question 4 is your big 30 marker, and what we would recommend that you do is make sure that you use the item to get lots of clues, but also put a brief plan together. What they found was on this question last year, according to the examiner report, that there was plenty of knowledge. However, the evaluation seemed to be quite limited, and that might be something that you might want to focus on. So if we have a look at what you actually had to do on this one, they'll always give you an item. They're expecting to use the item to give you clues and your knowledge, and look at sociological explanations to your understanding of crime prevention and control. So it's a little bit of a two-parter as well. So better answers will have addressed both those two things quite separately. Okay, now you can get lots of clues from the item about what you could have wrote about. So for example, you've got different types of societies, so you can have a little bit of analysis there, talking about postmodern society, modern society, pre-industrial society. I suppose you could use a little bit about sovereign power versus disciplinary power appeared on the mark scheme, but the most popular answers focused on crime prevention strategies, and these are given to you in the item, but they're hidden quite a bit. So you've got like tough punishments, so that is hinting at you to talk about zero tolerance approaches with the left realist. In particular, your situational crime prevention. You've got things like deterring would-be offenders as well, so acting as a deterrent. And you've got policies to tackle the underlying causes of crime, which tends to be more left realism, which is focusing on social and community, so tackling inequality or poverty and things like that. So they are addressing the crime deterrent or crime prevention. You could have also mentioned about environmental crime prevention as well, which is also a right realist approach, going along Wilson and Kellen's broken windows, talking about as a crime prevention strategy, assuming that people are rational and people are weighing up the pros and cons, so make it hard for people to rationally commit crime, make it a bit more difficult. So the most popular answers did that, and then you could talk about the crime control, and it gives you the clue there, and the most popular did mention about surveillance with the work of Foucault, panopticon, self-surveillance, as well, and what you could have done to get the evaluation and the higher analysis is have a backdrop of a debate between which is better, left realism or right realism, what's the strengths and weaknesses of both, or even the debate within surveillance as well, because you could have started to bring in this idea of self-surveillance, or is it an extension of social control, especially for women. You could have brought in feminism on this answer, and looking at things like a mechanism of social control as well. So better answers will have done both of these. They'll have addressed those separately, and they would have tried to evaluate as you go along. Okay, 45 minutes you should be spending on a 30-mark question, and I would use that little bit of space there just to spend 5 minutes planning your answers, so it flows if you want to be getting into the top band. Now that we have just covered so far is the crime part. The latter part of this paper is theory and methods. Okay, so you'll have 2 questions on theory and methods, one 10 marker and one 20 marker. You should be spending the remaining part of your time on that, the remaining 45 minutes. Okay, so a 10 marker, now this one's an outline and explain, so this is the second type of 10 marker. In the crime section we've already addressed the applying material from the item, and this is where you've got to show application between 2 different bullet points, I suppose, on the specification. So in this case you're looking for advantages of a method, and you've got to apply it as a source of data, and you've got to show the difference between overt and covert, showing some good knowledge. Okay, and again, majority of students did focus quite well on 2 advantages of overt. The most popular ones tended to be ethical, of consent, avoiding deception, or this one about being able to take notes openly, or even being avoided being drawn into any illegal activities. They tended to score quite well, but what you needed to do was to state why are they an advantage over the covert. Okay, so just make sure you are stating explicitly why they are advantages as a source of data, and make sure that you are talking about them being you know, you could even comment on the validity of that data as well. Just state explicitly why they're advantages, developing with an application of an example, and making that comparison to the covert. Okay, what I would suggest is that you avoid being drawn into giving any disadvantages, because they tended to be ignored. Okay, so 10 mark is available for that question. And again, if needs be, do a little bit of a plan beforehand, just so your answer is quite logical. Okay, and spending 15 minutes on that one, and make sure that you are leaving yourself enough time to do the second theory and methods question. The final question on paper 3 is question 6, and that is also a theory and method question. And as a typical 20 marker, you will get an item with it, and you are expected to draw from that item and make sure that you are evaluating. So this question is asking you for conflict approaches and comparing them to the consensus approaches for your understanding of society. Okay, now most popular students did draw from the item using functionalist as the consensus theory, contrasting it with the Marxist, applying feminist as well, but less confidence was applying the labelling theory and social action theories. Many students didn't go beyond actually explaining what was in the item. But what I would suggest is on this question, just make sure that you show good knowledge. The majority of students were able to show knowledge of the functionalist approach about society using Durkheim, Parsons, Merton, be able to talk about Marxist, and I suppose the different types of Marxist would have featured the humanist Marx, for example, or structural Marx. So the most popular answers compared the 2. And just make sure that you are applying it to the question, because what a weak student did, or what weak students tended to do, was that they started to describe what the functions were of the family according to functionalist, Marxist, feminist, or the functions of crime or education or whatever, and without actually applying to what the question was. And this question is really focusing on, as a theory, which ones are better. Okay, when the students did write about labelling theory, they described labelling actually without identifying labelling in the context of those being powerful labellers and the powerless people being labelled. Okay, so what I would say is just make sure that you are reading the questions carefully, applying to all the hooks in the question, and create the debate between the questions. Okay, so thank you for listening. It's just been a real quick video tutorial, just overviewing the different questions within this paper. But again, any questions you want me to go through in a little bit more detail, place in the comments below, and by all means, please make sure you do leave some comments and click like as well. Okay, thank you for listening. Have a great evening, and I shall see you soon. Bye bye.